Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 24. Today we will be mostly focusing on finishing the currently laid out railroad tracks, so we can start working on the proper delivery infrastructure in the following video. In this one, we will just about manage to reach the point where we have the signals laid down. We will also do a bit of fine-tuning on our garbage processing system. It needs a bit of attention still, since some of the deliveries were left in the old configuration on our technical services. As for those tower blocks we placed a while ago, those will be finally dealt with, and we will have plenty of space for new citizens to move into. I think, after so many people living in the town, we can more or less call this area good enough. We might build a couple more, but that's about it. Before we get started, if this is not your first video from this channel, you already know what to expect. If you want to be kept up to date, please consider subscribing, and if you like what you see, leaving a like will also help letting me know what to focus on. But enough talking, let's get into it. So, the first task we need to do is to set the different garbage collection buildings to send the appropriate junk to the relevant buildings. Construction waste goes to the gravel recycler, the metal scrap will need to be reprocessed into usable steel, and the plastic goes to the plastic reclamation. As for the other types of rubbish, like bio-waste, hazardous materials, and all the rest, those will go straight into the incinerator. And if the garbage needs separating, then it will go into sorting. Next up, I think we have way too many trucks using those 2 parking spots in the sorting plant. Between episodes, I did try to see what kind of building we could use to extend that number. Today, we will give one of them another try. Basically, once rubbish is sorted, there is no real way to have them in the same storage space. I tried to use both a garbage dump with the claw machine, as well as the regular old cargo station I mentioned in the last video. For some reason, even that one only allowed the loading of one stuff. So, we will just build one to show what the issue is, and then we will just build a simple dump, and use that to store the unsorted garbage, and leave the other trucks to use the facility's internal parking. I also wanted to reduce the traffic a little more today. The first step toward the goal was the completion of the tracks leading to the oil drop-off station in the construction hub. If we can use the tanker train to also deliver the fuel and bitumen to the hub, then we can get rid of those trucks who are doing that job right now, and use that distribution office for something else. There is a tiny bit of metal scrap in the incinerator's output dump. Easily fixed by telling the relevant truck to include that in the list of stops. This will happen again a little bit later, and at that point, I will simply tell the dump to only accept mixed rubbish, which will be pretty much ash only at that point. Now, the claw machine dump requires power, so let's build a substation first. Having 3 trucks to move garbage between the sorting and the incinerator is a bit of an overkill. 2 is more than enough. We might as well place the dump with the claw machine. I won't even bother building a proper driveway for it, dirt will be fine. Well, I think it's time to start building these apartment blocks. They've been waiting for this moment for a little longer than I would have liked. We also made sure to turn off citizens moving into them once they are finished. They are a bit on the edge of the city, so we will need to do a small test before we let everyone in. This is the only problematic intersection in the industrial zone at this point. Let's see if we can improve it a bit by moving some of the signs around. The silo is already clogged. There was a reason why I gave that place priority. So far so good. The only place that needs to wait a bit longer is the road coming out from the clothing warehouse. And that driveway is pretty long, so it can handle it without causing a deadlock. And that apartment tower got built real fast. Time to let in a small test sample of people, and see if they lack any of the important services. It seems I forgot to ask to be notified when the dump got finished, and at this point, it's full of mixed garbage. This is where I gave up on the whole thing, and just decided to replace it with a simple dump for the town garbage to be emptied into. Also, as I've said, it can only store a single kind of garbage at a time, and we cannot use to load both metal scrap and plastic at the same time. To be perfectly efficient, we should try to build all the recycling plants directly attached to it in the future, so that's what we will do in the next town. Technically, we could build the plastic recycling there. But we already have it built nearby, and it only needs a single truck to move the minuscule amount of scrap over, so I'm not all that worried about it. Alright. Now we just need to electrify the tracks leading up to the oil station and the hub, And then we can tell the train to include it in the list of stops, and we can take a couple more trucks off the road. We of course set these tracks to be high priority, and we also took the previous segments off the list for good measure. As soon as this factory connection is gone, we will get started on that simple dump. By the way, the only reason why I decided to use that instead of the claw machine one was that it won't require power to operate. For our purposes, the previous one also would have worked fine. At this point, we can safely replace the road going to the gravel recycling, so we can stop using that inefficient dirt connection. I just noticed that these bin holders are not configured yet for recycling. Since we are taking separated garbage to the relevant facilities, we should set as many of these stands as we can. Which pretty much only includes the big ones. The small ones don't have enough bins to deal with garbage separation. Just to be extra sure we have all of them configured, I checked on the list of buildings. It seems we got them all. We really need to start using the big stands more from now on. And the tracks that we needed are all electrified. We can tell the train to include the construction hub station in its list of stops, so we can use even fewer trucks on the roads. There we go, we now have a much more efficient way of delivering these products to the construction hub. These trucks in the distribution office are no longer needed. We can safely scrap them, and use that place for something else. Alright. As I've said, we will use this dump to collect the garbage from the town, and leave the parking spots in the sorting plant to the trucks moving the recyclables to their final destinations. Also, since this is an input, we needed to set the factory connection's direction to face the building, not the dump. I wish the simple cargo depot would work as expected, but as I've said, it only allowed the loading of one separated scrap, not both for some reason. Just to make sure things worked as intended, I waited a bit to make sure the town garbage got redirected to the dump, and then I moved on. And we had metal scrap in the incinerator again. Time to empty it out again. I am not really sure where that stuff comes from now. We should have everything covered. Maybe it's just leftover stuff from before we set everything correctly. Anyways, after it was empty, I purposefully set it to only accept mixed garbage, which pretty much mean pure ash at this point. And it seemed to be working as intended. Any ash that makes it into that outdoor dump get blown away by the wind, and we don't need to worry about emptying it out. But I still decided not to stop that dedicated line that's supposed to export the ash. I wasn't confident that it won't get clogged up in the future, so I left that truck running. Well, it seems we only have a single track segment left to build, and then we can start electrifying stuff. I quickly made sure to only allow one of the EDK track layers to work on it, so it gets done in a single trip. And the rail network is ready for those catenaries. It's been a long time coming, and thankfully, this is a much faster process than the actual track laying. It shouldn't take too long to finish everything. Ever since we stopped buying so many vehicles, our bank balance got a lot healthier, so I think it's time to repay one of those big loans we've been suffering from. Just as expected, our biggest expenditure right now is the steel, but electronics are also a concern. The next town will definitely have to be for making steel, and maybe even as a source of electronics and mechanical parts. If we can take all those off our list of imports, and maybe even export some of them, then we will be pretty much set in terms of money for the rest of the game. Anyways, I finally decided to recycle those tanker trucks at that distribution office, and got around to using the office for another job, namely the delivery of food. We've been relying on the free ones at the border, so we should try to make those obsolete. And to further reduce the overall road traffic, we can redirect some of those grain delivery trucks to that office. Once the rail distribution comes online, we will no longer need to deliver grain to the clothing warehouse by road, we will be able to do it by trains. We are almost completely done with the research tree. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but personally, I really like the feature. It made the early game much more interesting, and it also unlocked features that I really like, such as the population boosting study, or the inoculation research for epidemics. Not really sure how some of these would work with the research system turned off. I think the garbage processing is working more or less on autopilot at this point. We might need to add a truck here or there in the future, as those last couple houses fill up with people, but that's about it. At this point, all we could really do is wait for the railroad electrification to finish, so I decided to fast forward a little bit. It seems people are pretty much fine in the new tower block. I think we can safely open the next one. We only really need to keep an eye on the local shopping center. If that one starts to get overwhelmed, then we need to build another. That is why I open those towers one by one. I'll be honest, I think at this point the original track layer is more of a hindrance than anything. It can do very short segments, and it just keeps getting in the way. Maybe it's time to send it to the depot. I still would like to make the same kind of monument out of it like we did in the last series, but with the maintenance mechanic, I'm not sure how viable it is. We can't repair it while it's standing on the isolated tracks, and it would start to look really run down as time passes. I will need to think about it. Only one left. And the railroad network is now officially ready to receive the signals. This is always a big moment for me. Well, time to get to work. In case you are not familiar with the signal system for this game, there are two kinds: regular block signals and chain signals. Regular ones behave like one would expect, but the chain signals only turn green if the signal after them is also green. This is very handy for keeping intersections clear of idle trains. If we place chain signals as entrances to intersections, and regular signals as exits, then trains will only enter these track segments if they can also leave immediately, since their target signal block will be empty. Which means there are 3 rules we need to follow. First, use chain signals as entrances to junctions. Second, use regular signals as exits. And third, make sure that the signal blocks following a junction is long enough to fully accept the length of any train that will ever use it, so no part of the train gets left inside the junction, should it ever get held up in the exit block. And that's about it, the 3 golden rules I follow when placing signals. Chains going in, regulars going out, and leave room in the exit block. Never let me down. Of course there is more to it than that, but it's a good foundation to go by. To go into more detail, also pay attention to the color of the resulting signal blocks. Blue means there is only one entrance, and one exit possible on that block. Basically a place for trains to wait if they get held up for some reason. The other one is orange. Those are junction blocks, with multiple entrances, and/or exits. If you ever encounter a purple block, then there is something wrong. Purple ones basically mean that there are 2 junction blocks right next to each other, and that can result in some unintended behaviors. For the best possible outcomes, you should always strive to only have blue and orange blocks. If you ever see a purple one, there are 2 options. Either try to include a blue block between the 2 junctions, but as always, make sure those blue blocks are long enough to accept any train fully. Or, you could get rid of the signals that divide those 2 junctions, and merge them into a single block. There is another quirk of the chain signals I haven't talked about yet. Yes, they only let a train in if the next block along their route is empty. But, they will let more than one train into the junction block, if they are guaranteed not to cross paths. So, if 2 trains arrive at the junction in question at the same time, and if they wouldn't cross paths while inside the junction, then their respective signals will let them pass simultaneously. So, even if you end up merging 2 neighboring junctions together to get rid of a purple block, they will still work more or less efficiently. So don't get intimidated by having complicated junction blocks, as long as they don't have purple ones next to them. Technically, there are only 2 types of signals, chain and regular block, but there is one that combines the 2, named a mixed signal. Those are the ones with a regular signal facing one way, and a chain signal the other. Those are perfect for stations. If a junction needs to split into several station platforms, then use mixed signals. Basically, station platforms need to be two-way most of the time, unless they are set up as one-way specifically. Right now, all our stations are two-way. So, we can just place mixed signals at the station platforms, and make sure that the chain side of the signal is facing toward the junction, and the regular side into the station. That will make sure that trains can enter and leave the station, and others will wait at the junction without blocking the exit. And before you write that comment, yes, I did notice that one of the signals at the power trafo is backwards. I fixed it right after I stopped recording the main segment, but we will need to do it again in the next episode. I just wanted the train to be running for the outrow montage. Anyways, I think it's safe to assume that the next episode will involve a bit of railroad management. We will need to set up all sorts of deliveries, mostly in the 2 distribution offices, but we might also do a couple dedicated lines, where we only need to deal with a single product, like the cement or the gravel. For those kinds of stations, we don't really need to burden the RDO's limited assignment capacity. We will also likely get started on the infrastructure going toward our new town location, near the place where those coal and iron deposits are located. Setting that place up will be the next big challenge we face. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, and leaving a like would also let me know that this video was worth making. If you feel that it was good enough, and you can afford it, please consider going to my Ko-fi page, which you can find in the description, and donate an amount that you feel is appropriate. And if you did like what you've seen, there should be links to some of my other videos and playlists on the screen. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.